The world is waiting for the outcome of tomorrow's high-stakes nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in Geneva, hoping to prevent a war. Right now, the U.S. has more military firepower in the Middle East than at any point in decades, and President Trump is threatening to use it if a deal isn't reached.
After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons, yet they continue starting it all over. We wiped it out and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
Msnow's Ines de la Cuetare is reporting from Geneva. Richard Haass is the president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away. Richard, Trump is under some pressure to explain why the U.S. is apparently on the verge of war with Iran. Did he make a case in his speech last night?
The short answer is no. There's no clarity as to what our goals would be. Is it to deal with the nuclear program, ballistic missiles, their proxies? Is it to bring about regime change? How is military force likely to achieve that goal? What sort of a negotiated outcome might we find acceptable? No, so I think essentially the United States has put itself into the middle of a crisis. I call it a crisis of choice, one we've brought about. But the president last night did not explain to the American people exactly what's at stake and what he's prepared to do about it.
Well, the Iranians were pretty blunt in their reaction to Trump's speech last night. What can you tell us ahead of these talks?
Yeah, Chris, so you heard in the president's comments there off the top, he says that Iran essentially wants to negotiate, but they haven't yet said those secret words. He says that they will never have a nuclear weapon. And today we did hear those very words from the Iranian foreign minister. He put out a statement on X. He says, our fundamental convictions are crystal clear. Iran will under no circumstances ever develop a nuclear weapon. But then he goes on to say, neither will we Iranians ever forego our right to harness the dividends of peaceful nuclear technology for our people. That's something we've heard time and time again from the Iranians. They want a nuclear program, they say, for peaceful civilian purposes. The big question, of course, is how do you verify that? So that is likely going to be a big point of focus tomorrow when the talks resume here in Geneva. And I think something else worth keeping an eye on is that we have been hearing mixed messaging from the different parties involved in these talks. So we heard, for example, from the Americans that they were pushing for zero enrichment. Then we heard from the Iranian foreign minister speaking to Morning Joe on Friday that actually the Americans hadn't asked for zero enrichment. We heard from the presidential Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that Iran was basically almost a week away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And then we heard last night from President Trump saying that that essentially wasn't the case. He said that, he doubled down on his claims that the U.S. had completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program during those strikes this summer.
Thank you so much for that, Ines. Richard, I want to talk about the threat because I think for a lot of people not steeped in that world, they probably remember that the U.S. bombed Iran's nuclear facilities and, as we just heard from the president again last night, claimed to have put them out of business. But what do we know about the impact of those strikes? If it was significant, could they rebuild so quickly that there's an argument that we need the threat of war to keep America safe? Tell us what's real that we know on the ground.
And one of the first rules of intelligence, Chris, is you never know what you don't know. So yes, we set back the Iranian program at the 3 targets we attacked last spring. We have no idea to what extent did they pre-position or move uranium or centrifuges, what have you, to other sites that we didn't attack. The idea that they may have done some work since then. I assume that's the case. There's some photography that suggests it. We didn't destroy the knowledge in their minds. So this, and then going back to what you talked about a minute ago, the Iranians for years have said, the Ayatollah himself has said, Iran has no interest in nuclear weapon. The question is what they're permitted to do short of that, what we're prepared to tolerate. And then if we use force, again, what is it we're likely to destroy? Also, there's the question, how might the Iranians retaliate? If the president's worried about affordability and inflation here at home and the politics of it, it wouldn't take a whole lot for the Iranians to interfere with oil shipping in the Straits of Hormuz, and suddenly gasoline prices would spike. So this is a complicated situation. I don't think, by the way, just to be clear, we're going to get a resolution tomorrow in the talks.
So no resolution tomorrow, but is there potentially let me use this word for lack of another one, reasonable deal that both sides could get on board with?
100%. We've had deals in the past. The Obama administration had a deal. I think the real question is, what are we prepared to live with? And is Iran, for example, prepared to have an open-ended deal as opposed to one with time limits, duration limits on it? Will they be allowed to enrich uranium? What kind of inspections are going to be required? What about other inventories of delivery vehicles? We could go on and on. So the answer is absolutely. We could negotiate a deal. And by the way, I think the administration wants to negotiate a deal because once you start using military force, Iran gets a vote. And just because we want to keep it limited doesn't mean Iran would agree. They may decide they're in a better position to have an extended exchange than we are. So I think very much the administration would like to have a deal. They just need to be able to defend it politically.
Well, I think, as you know, Richard, Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefed Congress's Gang of Eight yesterday, and I want to play what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said today about that conversation.
Look, the bottom line is I can't say very much about it. It was a classified briefing, but it was very serious what they talked about, and they ought to lay out their plan and goals to the American people, plain and simple. And he didn't even talk about it.
Well, of course, presidents have some authority to use force, but only Congress can officially declare war. Is it clear where the line is, even as you say, if they want to negotiate a deal?
Look, presidents have enormous latitude when it comes to foreign policy. He can negotiate whatever deal he wants. He doesn't have to submit it to Congress for approval. It won't be a formal treaty. If he wants to use military force, he'll use military force. He'll say it's short of war. Therefore, he doesn't need congressional approval in advance. This is not unique to Donald Trump. Every president for the last, 7, 8 decades has operated in this fashion. So there's tremendous discretion here. And Iran has tremendous discretion as well about what it is they agree to, how it is they might retaliate militarily. That's what makes this so complicated. And again, we've parked all these military forces there. It's not clear to me, Chris, why we've brought this to a head, because there's so much uncertainty right now in the decision making of both sides.